Hey everybody, welcome back to Conscientious Omnivore. My name is Powell. Today I'm going to talk to you guys about a book. This book was very interesting. I was recommended this book by my wife, and it's called Pénz nélkül gazdagon, avagy a stílusos elszegényedés művészete. That's the Hungarian title. It was originally written in German, and the German title is, I'll read it to you in a second, Die Kunst des stilvollen Verarmens, and in English it was called The Art of Growing Poor Stylishly. So I think it has been translated into English quite some time ago, and it is in Hungarian. I read the Hungarian version, and it's really interesting. This book is kind of like a companion book of sorts to a book I've talked about before on the channel here. I've made a video about my kind of love of this book called Your Money or Your Life. If you haven't seen that video, check it out. It talks all about money and kind of how our life energy is really kind of what we trade for money, and that's what we work for, and that's what we get in equivalent, in exchange for our life energy. So I think that book is actually really good, and it gets into kind of like the nitty-gritty kind of like financial details of how to escape from the rat race and kind of live your life the way you want to live it, and be kind of like financially independent and all this kind of stuff. And it's a really good book. I recommend that to anybody. And this book was actually really good as well. I would recommend this one as well. This one is almost like, I say, a companion to that one, in the sense that this one focuses almost exclusively on really kind of like the emotional and kind of like intellectual aspects of basically dealing with money and dealing with poverty and dealing with almost like voluntary poverty, or with like voluntarily living a more modest and kind of I guess just like less extravagant lifestyle, and a simple lifestyle, and focusing on things that really matter and knowing what are those things that matter. And the book deals a lot with this kind of like idea that a lot of times money is what everyone thinks will bring them happiness, but it's actually not, and they end up feeling really kind of stressed, and they're always just looking for the next thing, and they never quite feel satisfied with what they have. So everyone who is actually really rich, a lot of those people are actually really poor inside, because they're always worried, and they're actually more stressed out than people who have way less than them and are actually content with what they have. So it talks a lot about these different kind of ideas, and I enjoyed it. At first I didn't really like it, but once I got kind of into the book, I got over my initial kind of like reaction. My initial thoughts were that that the person seemed to be almost kind of like advocating for this kind of simplified lifestyle, almost because they didn't really have a choice but to do so, because they kind of like lost their job and whatever. It didn't seem like it was voluntary. It was more like the person lost their high-paying gig, and then they were kind of forced to do it. But I think as I read more and kind of understood more of the person's backstory, and kind of then I think I realized that the guy's pretty legit. And it's actually written by the person Alexander von Schönburg, and he's quite got an interesting background. So he comes from a very wealthy, I guess, past, but his lineage has been getting poorer and poorer as the time has gone on. But he's got an official title or something, and it's really interesting. So check it out, read up on the guy, definitely recommend it. But why am I talking about this book here on this channel? Really, I wanted to tell you guys about one of the things that I learned in here, which was really cool. It refers to a lot of different books and kind of like interesting people and interviews and stuff like that, and I found it to be quite cool and interesting. But they have this one section in the book where he's talking about how sometimes in order to solve a problem, or the way we think about money, or the way we think about poverty, or even wealth, like sometimes to solve those problems that we have in our minds, we actually have to do something that's really out of the ordinary. And if you think that there may be like two solutions to a problem, like maybe just try some like really wacky like third option that like you don't even think would be like like sane basically, and sometimes that could be the solution. He gives examples for it, and this one was pretty crazy. So he's talking about in the 14th century there was a castle, the Hochosterwitz castle, and it was being besieged by a I don't know if it was a baroness or something, I don't know, anyway, from Tyrol, and they had been kind of at the siege for a while, and basically the the invading army was getting more and more impatient. The people in the army under the command of the leader were getting impatient, and what they didn't know was how much longer the people in the castle could take for the siege. And as it was, the truth of the matter was that the people inside were like on their very last kind of like resort. And so what happened is, I guess the person in charge of the defenses was notified that they were basically out of food. The only food they had left at that point was one ox, and they had 2 bags of grain. And they were like, what should we do? Like we're screwed, like we have no food. So the guy in charge says, kill the ox and throw tie the 2 bags of grain closed and throw them over the castle at the invading army. So they're just sort of like, well, we're screwed anyway. I mean, like, what's the difference if we starve now or starve, a couple days from now? Like, it's like, that's not enough to feed anybody, and they're basically out of food, so they're going to be dead anyway. So instead of giving up, like, he could have given up the castle and, like, asked for, like, mercy or whatever. He basically was just like, throw this stuff over the wall, and they did. And, the invading army, this, whoever she was, baroness or whatever, saw this as like, oh my god, like they must have like an insane amount of food left, because like what kind of person would do such a thing, like to throw like grains of sacks of grain and this like ox, which obviously would have fed like quite a number of people, over the wall. And they packed up and left because they were already running low on supplies themselves, and like winter was coming on, and they were just like, there's no way we can like take this castle. So the reason I tell you this story is just because it's kind of interesting that like I was thinking about it when I read this, my own situation. Like, my wife and I were like really kind of like at a turning point last year when I decided to quit my job. Well, when we decided, I guess I really kind of wanted to quit my job, and then my wife supported me. And we were just really talking so much about what we should do, because we had the house where we had problems, and it was with the mold, we couldn't live there. We're living at my in-laws, all this kind of stuff. If you haven't seen the old videos, check them out. But in a nutshell, like we were kind of at our wits' end. Like what I saw in front of me was like the same kind of like life that I was trying to actually get away from, that I see most people doing, which is like you are stuck in a 9 to 5. You are earning money, you don't see your family, you're in the office, you're killing yourself with work, and you have a mortgage, and you're going to pay that for 30 years, and then maybe if you're lucky, by the time you retire, you'll have no debt and maybe a tiny bit of savings, and then you can repeat the same cycle for your kids, and they can repeat the same cycle for their kids, and it's just like, that's not what I wanted to do. And yeah, it was just kind of like, well, what do? We don't have enough money to fix our house. We don't have enough, money to start our own like businesses or our own ideas that we wanted to be, working on. And, the solution was like, well, we don't have enough money. So what do we do? The solution was like, yeah, quit your job. It's like, I kind of feel like when I read this, I was like, yeah, I kind of threw the food over the wall. It's like you would think that like by quitting my job and not having steady income coming in, that would somehow make our situation worse. But it actually was like a huge benefit as far as I can see, till now. And it's coming up to almost a year ago that I actually gave my notice. So it's kind of crazy. And like actually, I think, yeah, it was right around this time last year that I gave my notice. And I mean, so what have we done? Like how have we made money? I mean, one of the big things that we ended up doing was that we sold our own house. So we saved a ton of money on commissions. Like we didn't have to end up paying a real estate agent. So that was a huge win. Other things that we did was we started selling and condensing a lot of our stuff that we don't need, and we are continuing to do that. So we're like simplifying a whole bunch of stuff. We're getting rid of a whole bunch of things that we don't need, and we're just selling this stuff. So there has been income coming from that. I've actually started doing some little part-time kind of teaching English here. So that has helped like a tiny bit. It's very minimal, but still, like, there's like little things like that I've done. And we've also kind of like changed a lot of the things that we buy to be cheaper, and or we started making a lot of things for ourselves that that we haven't been buying as much. Like we haven't been eating out as much, we haven't ordered pizza to the house as much, stuff like that, and it really adds up. We haven't gone to like pastry shops and stuff, like just like little things. We make ice cream at home now from like bananas and fruit and stuff like that, and it really adds up. Like you don't really think so, but reading books like this definitely helps, and reading books like the Your Money, Your Life really helps, because you really start seeing a lot of the things that you take for granted that like, oh, that's just a given, that's like I need that. And this book does a really good job of like telling you, do you really need it, or is it just something that you've kind of grown accustomed to and you think you need it but you really don't. And he gives really good examples from like lots of literary examples, and people like interviews and things like that, and from his own personal story and background. And it's really helpful to really analyze and look at kind of the situation you're in. So I just feel like for us, it has been a really productive year. I know things are going kind of slowly, like slower than I would want, but at the same time, like things have been good because I've been really spending a lot of time doing things that I actually really enjoy. I've been working in the garden a lot. We're pretty much like right on the cusp of starting work on our house. I'm going to do a separate video about that, and if anybody's interested. So I'm really excited about that. The deal has gone through, so we're kind of just waiting for the paperwork from the deed office at this point. That's like the last step at this point, so it's really cool. Like the place is going to be ours, and I've been doing tons of work in the garden. I just came back after a long day there today, and yeah, it's just really cool. Like I mean, I've definitely had more time to work on things that I want to do. It has been way less stressful than being at work, and yeah, our money has kind of like dwindled. I mean, we've been living off of savings, but it's going pretty well. I mean, I think we have like a good plan in place. We have like I would say like a broken shoestring budget to build a house from. That's going to be stressful, but I look forward to it, and I actually think we're going to be able to do it. I've always been kind of like an optimistic person, so I have kind of this optimistic streak that gets me in trouble sometimes, but I really feel like we're going to be able to do it. And I have a lot of help from my dad, and I'm sure from my brother and other people and friends that are going to help us, and I think we're going to be able to build a house. So I look forward to it. But anyway, that's a story for another video. Really, for this video, I just wanted to kind of talk about this situation and kind of how it relates to me, and maybe if it relates to anybody else. Like sometimes I think doing the scary thing that you're really afraid of, sometimes that might be kind of like what you need to do. In the book they call it the I think it was like a paradox intervention or something. I read up on it after on the computer, and it's not exactly what I thought it would be based on what I read in the book. I guess it's like a psychology kind of thing to get people to deal with their fears. What they do is kind of like a psychologist will prescribe the thing that the person is maybe irrationally afraid of, or they think that something is happening to them kind of involuntarily, and then the thing they're worried about is actually prescribed to them as the treatment. So I'm not really sure if the thing that I described kind of would fall into that category, but it's an interesting thing anyway. So I think if anybody's curious, you can read up on that too, the paradox intervention. But yeah, that's it. I think I rambled enough for this video. If you guys have had similar situations, maybe put a comment below. I'm curious if anybody's run into the same thing. But yeah, like a year ago when we were sitting talking, my wife and I, it seemed like the scariest, craziest thing in the world to do would be to quit my job, but it has worked out great so far. And yeah, like, I mean, we kind of took a huge, scary jump, and so far so good. So yeah. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. See you in the next one, and thanks for everybody for subscribing, and hope you enjoyed it. Bye.